In the heart of quiet American town, a routine traffic stop turned into a moment the officer would never forget. A black man behind the wheel, polite and composed, yet moments later, handcuffed and humiliated without cause. But what the officer didn't know was who he had just arrested. Before we dive into this powerful story, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us create more stories that open eyes, stir hearts, and spark change. Now, let's begin the story of cop mocks black man at traffic stop. Freezes when he sees his FBI badge. In the small, quiet town of Darlington, nestled on the outskirts of Georgia, a sharp morning breeze swept through the empty streets. Tree branches swayed gently, and a thin layer of mist clung to the windows of closed storefronts. It was the kind of town where everybody knew each other by name, or thought they did. From the corner of a modest cul-de-sac, a black man stepped out of his home, his presence calm yet commanding. He wore a plain black jacket, dark jeans, and well-kept leather boots. In his hand, a cup of coffee released a trail of steam into the crisp air. His name was Malcolm Harris. To the neighbors, Malcolm was just Ava's husband, a quiet man with good manners and a mysterious schedule. Ava, a beloved elementary school teacher, was the face of their family. Malcolm, on the other hand, preferred silence and simplicity. But behind those observant eyes and quiet demeanor lay a secret life. Malcolm wasn't just another local. He was a senior field agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, deep into a covert operation targeting a human trafficking ring. It was a mission that required more than just surveillance. It demanded silence, patience, and total invisibility. For Malcolm, blending in with survival. This morning, like many others, Malcolm was preparing for a routine contact meeting. He had no weapon, no badge on display, and no protection. He drove an old black SUV, kept deliberately average, nothing flashy. He had trained for years to be the kind of man no one remembered. But sometimes being invisible came at a cost. Because in a town like Darlington, being a black man in the wrong car at the wrong time could draw the wrong kind of attention. And that attention was already waiting just 2 blocks away, parked in a cruiser with the windows down and a smirk on his face. Officer Ray Dalton. He didn't know Malcolm, but he didn't need to. One look was enough for Dalton to judge, and that judgment would soon change his life. Officer Ray Dalton tapped his fingers rhythmically on the steering wheel of his patrol cruiser. The dashboard clock blinked 7:42. He had been parked at the corner of Elmwood and 3rd for over an hour, sipping cheap coffee and waiting for something to break the monotony of his shift. And then he saw it. A black SUV rolled past him. Nothing illegal, no speeding, no broken taillight. But his eyes narrowed. It wasn't the car. It was the man behind the wheel. Figures, Dalton muttered under his breath. He pulled out onto the road, slow and deliberate, trailing the SUV like a predator waiting for a stumble. Inside the vehicle, Malcolm kept his eyes on the road, senses alert. His years of training taught him how to notice a tail, even one as subtle as a Border Patrol officer with an agenda. He recognized the model of the cruiser in his rear-view mirror and noted the distance. It hadn't changed in 3 blocks. Then came the flash of red and blue. Malcolm exhaled slowly. He signaled and pulled aside of the road, the SUV rolling to a gentle stop under a row of sycamore trees. He turned off the engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and waited. Dalton approached the car like a man on stage, chest puffed, boots crunching on gravel. He tapped the window once. Malcolm rolled it down. License and registration, Dalton barked. "Of course, officer," Malcolm said calmly, voice steady. Dalton didn't like the tone. Too calm, too polite, too composed. "What's your business here?" Dalton asked, glancing around the interior like he expected something to jump out. "I live in town," Malcolm answered, handing over his documents. Dalton looked at the name. Malcolm D. Harris. It rang no bell, but that didn't stop him. "This car registered to you?" "It is." "You from around here?" "I've lived in Darlington for 3 years. Dalton snorted. "You don't look like you belong on this side of town." Malcolm didn't flinch. He met Dalton's eyes. "Is there a problem, officer?" That was the moment. The thin veil of civility cracked. Dalton stepped back, stepped out of the vehicle. Malcolm didn't move at first, not out of fear, but out of calculation. Every second mattered. Every movement could be misunderstood. He opened the door slowly and stepped out, hands where I can see them. They were already up. Dalton circled him like a hawk. Then, without warning, he grabbed Malcolm's wrists and yanked him behind his back. "You're being detained." "For what?" Malcolm asked, still calm. "We'll figure that out." The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut. Behind them, a jogger slowed down. Then a cyclist passed, turning their head. A phone lifted. A camera lens glinted in the sun. But Dalton didn't notice. He was too focused on proving a point he would soon regret. Malcolm stood by the side of the road, wrists bound behind his back, head high, gaze steady. The cuffs pinched his skin, but his face didn't show it. Officer Dalton tightened them. "Anyway, you think you're clever, don't you?" Dalton muttered as he led Malcolm toward the cruiser. "Polite voice, nice car. Must be playing some kind of game." Malcolm didn't reply. His silence only irritated Dalton more. Traffic was light, but not invisible. A local bakery worker paused on the sidewalk. A mother pushing a stroller slowed down. Two teenagers, eyes wide, pulled out their phones. One of them whispered, "Is that guy getting arrested?" What did he do? Dalton pushed Malcolm against the hood of the cruiser, hands still cuffed, his face reflecting in the windshield. "You hiding something in the car?" Dalton asked loudly, looking over his shoulder at the onlookers. "Drugs? Stolen goods." Malcolm responded evenly. "There's nothing illegal in that vehicle. You're making a mistake." Dalton scoffed. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love me to believe that." He threw open the rear door of the cruiser and motioned Malcolm in. Malcolm hesitated. "I have rights." Dalton leaned in close. "Not when you're acting suspicious in my town." The door slammed shut behind him. Inside the cruiser, Malcolm looked out the tinted glass at the people gathering. Their stares weren't just curious anymore. Some looked uneasy, some confused, some angry, but not one of them intervened. Not yet. Dalton returned to the SUV and started rifling through it. Glove box, center console. He pulled out a brown leather wallet. Then he froze. There it was, a badge, not local, not state. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Agent ID, level clearance, Malcolm D. Harris. Dalton's face went pale. He blinked twice, lips parted slightly. He looked over at the cruiser where Malcolm sat calmly in the back seat, watching him. A drop of sweat rolled down Dalton's temple. He slammed the glove box shut and backed away from the car as if it had bitten him. His hands trembled as he reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, I need to run a federal badge ID. Urgent." Silence. Then the voice of the dispatcher came back. "Copy that. Give me the number." Dalton read it aloud. A long pause followed. "Officer Dalton," the dispatcher said, voice low and confused. "You might want to sit down. That is senior FBI field agent, currently embedded on assignment in our district." Dalton's knees went weak. His voice barely came out. "What?" Inside the cruiser, Malcolm turned his head slightly. He hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. Officer Ray Dalton stood frozen next to Malcolm's SUV, fingers still wrapped around the edge of the door. The radio on his shoulder crackled faintly with background chatter, but all he heard was the weight of what he'd just done. Senior FBI field agent. It echoed in his skull like a gavel slamming down in court. He looked back toward the patrol cruiser where Malcolm sat handcuffed in the back seat. The agent wasn't angry, not visibly. He wasn't shouting or threatening a lawsuit. He just sat there, calm, silent, watching. And somehow that was worse. Dalton fumbled for the keys on his belt, nearly dropping them as he unlocked the rear door. He opened it slowly. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. Malcolm didn't move. Dalton cleared his throat. "You're free to go." "I didn't realize." Malcolm leaned forward, his voice quiet but razor sharp. "Didn't realize what?" Dalton couldn't answer. His lips moved, but nothing came out. The people still watching from the sidewalk were whispering now, cameras still pointed. The atmosphere had shifted. The man Dalton had tried to humiliate now had the full weight of federal authority behind him. Malcolm stepped out. Dalton moved to remove the cuffs, but his hands shook too much. Malcolm turned, offering his wrists with the same steady composure. Dalton finally unlocked them. The metal dropped to the pavement with a sharp clang. Malcolm rubbed his wrists. "I'd like your badge number." Dalton hesitated, then whispered, "It won't be necessary. I'll file a report." Malcolm's gaze hardened. "You already did." Without another word, he walked past Dalton and got into his SUV. As the engine rumbled to life, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. His message had been delivered without raising his voice. Dalton stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by the very community he was sworn to protect. His face was red, his pride cracked wide open. At that exact moment, back at Darlington Police Headquarters, a call was coming in from Washington, and it had Malcolm D. Harris written all over it. Back at Darlington Police Headquarters, Chief Brenda Moore stood in her office, staring at the message that had just appeared on her secure terminal. Subject: Incident involving Agent Malcolm Harris. Immediate review required. Within minutes, her office filled with tension. 2 officers from Internal Affairs, summoned directly from the State Bureau, had already arrived. And behind them, in an unmarked black sedan, came Lieutenant Victor Lane, the FBI liaison overseeing Malcolm's operation. The air was sharp with formality as Chief Moore called Officer Dalton into the room. Dalton entered stiffly, his face pale, his voice low. "I didn't know who he was." "You didn't ask," Chief Moore said coldly, "and you had no cause to stop him in the first place." Dalton looked at Lieutenant Lane, whose expression was unreadable. Lane finally spoke. "Agent Harris was in the final stages of infiltrating a trafficking ring involving a corrupt trucking route through this district. Your officer nearly compromised a federal sting." Dalton's lips parted in disbelief. "I mean, it doesn't matter what you meant," Lane interrupted, his voice even. "You saw a black man in a nice car and assumed he was a criminal. That assumption put years of work at risk." Chief Moore leaned forward. "You're suspended. Effective immediately." Dalton tried to speak, but the weight of it all rendered him mute. His badge was placed gently, but symbolically on the desk. The next day, a press conference was held outside Darlington Police Department. The crowd was larger than expected: journalists, activists, locals, and even national media. The footage of Malcolm's detainment had gone viral overnight. Malcolm stood at the podium, flanked by Chief Moore and Lieutenant Lane. His voice was calm. No bitterness, no anger, just truth. "I'm not here to destroy reputations. I'm here to shed light," he began. "What happened to me wasn't new. It was just caught on camera." A quiet murmur swept through the audience. "I don't carry hate in my heart. I carry purpose. I hope what happened will force a conversation in every department, in every town, about bias and accountability." The crowd broke into quiet applause. Even Chief Moore bowed her head slightly. Malcolm stepped down from the podium and into the arms of his wife, Ava, who had stood silently to the side the whole time. She held him with quiet pride. Officer Dalton resigned from the force. He avoided the media and left town under a cloud of disgrace, his name now synonymous with the consequences of unchecked power. But Malcolm stayed, not to surveil, not to punish, but to teach. The FBI assigned him a new role, Director of Field Bias Training. He returned to Darlington not as an agent in the shadows, but as a mentor in the light. He stood in front of classrooms filled with young officers, teaching them not only law and procedure, but how to unlearn fear, how to recognize bias before it becomes violence, how to listen before it's too late. In that same classroom, on the back wall, hung a simple photograph. A black man standing tall in front of a patrol car, his wrists free, his gaze unwavering. A reminder, that power is not in a badge. It's in knowing when not to use it. Moral message and life lesson. We live in a world where appearances often become the first judgment, and tragically, sometimes the final one. Malcolm Harris represents calm in the storm of prejudice. He teaches us that true strength doesn't come from retaliation, but from self-control and unshakable principles. His silence in the face of humiliation wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. He chose purpose over pride. This story reminds us that power without conscience leads to self-destruction. Officer Dalton didn't just lose his badge, he lost his integrity. Not because he made procedural error, but because he allowed bias to speak louder than truth. Malcolm didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stood in the truth. And in doing so, he changed everything. May we all learn to see people not for the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or the neighborhood they drive through, but for the humanity they carry. Because respect is not earned through a badge. It's earned through character.